Every human life is shaped by a quiet force that most people never see and rarely question. It operates continuously, influencing perception, emotion, and behavior with remarkable precision. This force is thought. From the moment you wake in the morning to the final moments before sleep, your inner dialogue is designing the framework of your experience. It determines how you interpret events, how you respond to challenges, and how you define your sense of possibility. Most people believe they are reacting to the world as it is. In reality, they are reacting to the world as their thoughts present it. If you could listen closely to the average person's internal conversation for a single day, you would hear a steady stream of judgments, predictions, worries, and assumptions. Many of these thoughts repeat themselves with mechanical regularity. They form patterns so familiar that they appear to be facts rather than interpretations. Over time, these patterns solidify into beliefs, and beliefs quietly dictate the boundaries of a person's life. Opportunities are ignored because they seem unrealistic. Risks are avoided because failure feels inevitable. Ambitions are reduced to match the limits imposed by unexamined thinking. The most significant discovery you can make is that thoughts are not permanent structures. They are mental events, passing constructions that can be observed, evaluated, and deliberately redirected. The moment you recognize this, a new dimension of personal power becomes available. You are no longer a passive recipient of whatever your mind produces. You become an active participant in shaping the quality and direction of your thinking. This realization challenges one of the deepest assumptions people hold about themselves. Many individuals identify so completely with their thoughts that they assume there is no separation between the thinker and the thinking. When a negative thought arises, it is accepted as truth. When doubt appears, it is treated as an accurate assessment of reality. Yet thoughts are interpretations filtered through past experiences, emotional states, and learned habits. They are not objective measurements of the world. They are stories the mind tells to make sense of experience. Consider how a single event can produce radically different reactions in different people. One person may interpret a setback as proof of inadequacy, while another sees it as information and an opportunity to improve. The external situation is identical, but the internal narrative transforms its meaning. Over time, these narratives accumulate, creating either a sense of limitation or a sense of possibility. In this way, the architecture of a life is built not only from external circumstances, but from the invisible structure of thought that interprets them. Modern neuroscience provides compelling evidence that repeated patterns of thinking physically shape the brain. Neural pathways strengthen with use, becoming more efficient and more dominant over time. When a person repeatedly entertains fearful or self-critical thoughts, the brain becomes increasingly skilled at generating those patterns. Conversely, when an individual intentionally cultivates constructive and solution-oriented thinking, new neural connections are formed. This process, known as neuroplasticity, confirms that mental habits are not fixed traits. They are adaptable systems that respond to conscious effort and repetition. Understanding this adaptability introduces a profound responsibility. If your thoughts are shaping both your brain and your behavior, then the quality of your thinking directly influences the trajectory of your life. Uncontrolled thought patterns can confine you to cycles of anxiety, hesitation, and dissatisfaction. Deliberately guided thoughts can expand your capacity for resilience, creativity, and purposeful action. The difference between these outcomes is not a matter of chance. It is the result of awareness and intentional practice. The relationship between thoughts, emotions, and actions forms a continuous feedback loop. A thought generates an emotional response, and that emotion influences behavior. Behavior then produces results that reinforce the original thought. When the initiating thought is negative or limiting, The loop perpetuates itself in a way that appears to confirm the individual's fears. When the initiating thought is constructive and realistic, the loop begins to support growth and achievement. Many people attempt to change their lives by focusing exclusively on behavior, forcing themselves into new routines without addressing the underlying patterns of thought. Such efforts often fail because they do not alter the source of the cycle. Effective transformation begins with awareness. To control your thoughts, you must first learn to observe them without immediate judgment or identification. This act of observation creates a subtle but crucial distance between you and your mental activity. In that space, choice becomes possible. Instead of reacting automatically to every thought that arises, you gain the ability to evaluate its usefulness. You can ask whether a particular line of thinking serves your long-term goals or merely perpetuates familiar discomfort. Cultivating this observer perspective requires patience and practice. The mind is accustomed to operating on autopilot, generating associations and reactions with extraordinary speed. At first, attempts to monitor your thinking may reveal how restless and repetitive the mental stream can be. This discovery is not a sign of failure. It is evidence of increasing awareness. Each moment of recognition weakens the grip of unconscious patterns and strengthens your capacity for deliberate direction. As you develop greater control over your thoughts, you begin to notice subtle shifts in perception. Situations that once triggered automatic negativity become opportunities for measured response. Emotional reactions grow less impulsive and more proportionate. Decisions are guided less by fear and more by clarity. These changes accumulate gradually, but their impact is significant. They alter the way you engage with work, relationships, and personal aspirations. Over time, the external structure of your life begins to reflect the internal discipline you have cultivated. The power of thought control is not about suppressing every negative idea or maintaining constant optimism. Such extremes are neither realistic nor desirable. Instead, it is about developing a balanced relationship with your mind. You learn to acknowledge difficult thoughts without being dominated by them. You recognize constructive possibilities without denying genuine challenges. This balanced awareness allows you to respond to reality with intelligence rather than reflex. Every meaningful change in human history has begun as a change in thinking. Innovations, social movements, and personal transformations all originate in the capacity to imagine alternatives to existing conditions. When you learn to guide your thoughts intentionally, you participate in this creative process at the most personal level. You become capable of redesigning habits, redefining goals, and reshaping the narrative that governs your identity. The journey toward mastering your thoughts is not a single decision, but an ongoing discipline. It involves repeated moments of awareness, conscious redirection, and patient reinforcement of healthier patterns. There will be periods of progress and moments of regression. What matters is the consistent return to observation and choice. Each time you redirect an unhelpful thought, you affirm your role as the architect of your inner world. In recognizing the influence of your thoughts, you confront both a challenge and an opportunity. The challenge lies in accepting responsibility for patterns that may have operated unnoticed for years. The opportunity lies in realizing that these patterns are not permanent. They can be examined, revised, and replaced. Within this process resides the capacity to transform not only how you think, but how you live. The practice of directing your thoughts begins with a simple but demanding commitment to honesty. You must be willing to see your mental patterns as they are, not as you wish them to be. Many people spend years avoiding this examination because it exposes uncomfortable truths. It reveals recurring fears, persistent doubts, and ingrained assumptions that quietly shape behavior. Yet avoidance does not dissolve these patterns. It strengthens them. What remains unobserved tends to operate with greater authority, influencing decisions from behind the scenes. When you begin to observe your thoughts consistently, patterns start to emerge. You may notice that certain situations trigger predictable internal reactions. A minor criticism might ignite a disproportionate sense of failure. An uncertain opportunity may immediately summon thoughts of risk and inadequacy. These reactions often originate in earlier experiences that taught the mind to associate specific events with danger or disappointment. Over time, the brain learns to anticipate similar outcomes and prepares defensive responses in advance. Recognizing these patterns is the first step toward interrupting them. Awareness alone does not eliminate conditioned responses, but it introduces a pause between stimulus and reaction. In that pause lies the possibility of choice. Instead of allowing an automatic narrative to dictate your response, you can question its accuracy. You can examine the evidence supporting the thought and consider alternative interpretations. This process transforms the mind from an unquestioned authority into an instrument subject to evaluation. Questioning your thoughts requires intellectual discipline. The mind is skilled at presenting assumptions as facts, and it often resists scrutiny. A thought such as, "I always fail at this," may feel convincing because it is supported by vivid memories of past difficulties. Yet a careful examination may reveal exceptions, partial successes, and opportunities for improvement that the initial statement ignores. By challenging exaggerated or absolute language, you weaken the emotional intensity attached to the thought and create space for a more balanced perspective. As this practice becomes habitual, you begin to experience a shift in your relationship with uncertainty. Situations that once provoked immediate anxiety are approached with curiosity and analysis. Instead of asking, "What if I fail?" you may ask, "What can I learn from this attempt?" This subtle change in questioning alters the emotional tone of the experience. Fear gives way to engagement, and engagement encourages action. Through repeated exposure to constructive thinking, confidence grows not from blind optimism, but from evidence of your ability to respond effectively. An essential component of thought control is the deliberate cultivation of attention. Attention is the gateway through which thoughts gain influence. Whatever consistently captures your focus tends to dominate your mental landscape. In a world saturated with distractions, untrained attention is easily pulled towards stimuli that reinforce restlessness and comparison. News cycles emphasize conflict, social platforms encourage constant evaluation, and entertainment offers endless avenues for escape. Without intentional guidance, attention fragments, and fragmented attention weakens the capacity for reflective thought. Training your attention involves choosing, repeatedly and consciously, what deserves your mental energy. This does not require withdrawing from modern life, but engaging with it selectively. When you notice your focus drifting toward unproductive rumination or external noise, you gently redirect it to the task or idea that aligns with your priorities. This act of redirection may appear insignificant in isolation, yet its cumulative effect is profound. Each instance strengthens neural circuits associated with concentration and self-regulation. Sustained attention also enhances emotional regulation. Emotions often intensify when thoughts spiral unchecked, feeding on one another in rapid succession. By stabilizing your focus, you slow this cascade. You become capable of observing emotional reactions as they develop, recognizing their connection to specific thoughts. This awareness allows you to intervene before emotions escalate into impulsive behavior. Instead of being carried by the momentum of feeling, you remain anchored in deliberate choice. The integration of awareness, questioning, and attention gradually produces a form of mental resilience. Resilience does not imply the absence of difficulty. Challenges, disappointments, and unexpected changes remain inevitable. What changes is your capacity to meet them without surrendering to destructive narratives. You learn to interpret setbacks as temporary conditions rather than permanent verdicts on your ability. This interpretation sustains motivation and encourages adaptive problem-solving. Over time, the disciplined management of thought extends beyond individual situations and begins to influence your broader identity. Identity is, in many respects, a collection of deeply held beliefs about who you are and what you are capable of achieving. When these beliefs are examined and refined, identity becomes more flexible and expansive. You cease to define yourself solely by past limitations and begin to incorporate evidence of growth. This evolving self-concept supports increasingly ambitious goals and sustained effort. The process of reshaping identity through thought control is gradual. It unfolds through repeated interactions between intention and experience. Each time you respond to a challenge with clarity rather than avoidance, you reinforce a narrative of competence. Each time you redirect a self-defeating thought, you affirm your agency. These moments accumulate, forming a coherent sense of self grounded in deliberate action rather than inherited assumptions. As your internal dialogue becomes more intentional, your external relationships also begin to change. Communication improves when it is guided by reflective thought rather than reactive emotion. You become more attentive to the perspectives of others, less defensive in the face of disagreement, and more precise in expressing your intentions. This clarity fosters trust and reduces unnecessary conflict. Relationships shaped by conscious communication tend to be more stable and mutually supportive. The influence of controlled thinking extends to long-term planning and decision-making. When the mind is not dominated by fear or distraction, it becomes capable of sustained strategic thought. You can evaluate options with greater objectivity, weighing immediate desires against future consequences. This capacity supports choices that align with your deeper values rather than transient impulses. Over years, such choices compound, directing your life toward outcomes that reflect deliberate design. It is important to recognize that mastery of thought is not a destination, but an ongoing practice. The mind continually generates new challenges, adapting to circumstances and introducing fresh complexities. Periods of stress may temporarily disrupt established habits of awareness. During such times, the discipline you have cultivated serves as a stabilizing framework. You return to observation, questioning, and focused attention, reaffirming your commitment to conscious direction. Through persistent practice, you come to appreciate that thought control is less about domination than about partnership. You are not attempting to silence the mind, but to collaborate with it. The mind's capacity for imagination, analysis, and creativity is a powerful asset when guided by awareness. By establishing a cooperative relationship with your thinking processes, you harness their strengths while mitigating their tendencies toward distortion. In this partnership lies the foundation for lasting change. When your thoughts align with your intentions, your actions acquire coherence and purpose. Effort is no longer scattered across conflicting impulses, but concentrated on meaningful objectives. This alignment generates momentum. Progress becomes visible, reinforcing your commitment to the discipline that produced it. The transformation that follows is both subtle and comprehensive. It does not arrive as a sudden revelation, but as a steady reconfiguration of daily experience. Tasks are approached with greater presence, challenges with measured confidence, and successes with grounded appreciation. You begin to recognize that the quality of your life is inseparable from the quality of your thinking. By shaping one, you inevitably shape the other. This understanding marks a turning point. You no longer regard your thoughts as incidental background activity. You see them as the primary medium through which your life is interpreted and directed. With this recognition comes a renewed sense of responsibility and possibility. Each moment offers an opportunity to practice awareness, to refine interpretation, and to choose responses that reflect your highest intentions. As you continue this journey, the discipline of thought control becomes integrated into your character. It informs how you learn, how you adapt, and how you pursue growth. The mind, once a source of unchecked turbulence, evolves into a reliable instrument for exploration and creation. Through its guidance, you participate actively in shaping a life defined not by automatic habit, but by conscious design. As your awareness deepens, you begin to notice that many of the thoughts that once seemed urgent lose their authority when examined closely. Ideas that previously commanded immediate reaction start to appear provisional and negotiable. This shift does not occur because the external world has changed, but because your internal posture toward it has matured. You are no longer compelled to accept every mental impulse as a directive. Instead, you treat thoughts as proposals that require evaluation before acceptance. This evaluative stance introduces a new level of psychological freedom. Freedom, in this context, is not the absence of constraints, but the presence of conscious choice. When you are free in your thinking, you are not imprisoned by reflexive interpretations or inherited assumptions. You can respond to circumstances in ways that reflect deliberate values rather than conditioned habits. This capacity is especially important in moments of pressure, when the mind tends to revert to familiar patterns. Under stress, untrained thinking narrows perception and exaggerates threats. Trained awareness expands perception and restores proportion. One of the most effective ways to strengthen this freedom is through the systematic refinement of language. The words you use internally to describe situations exert a powerful influence on emotional response. Language is not a neutral medium. It frames experience. When you label a challenge as a catastrophe, your body reacts with tension and urgency. When you describe the same event as a difficulty or a problem to be solved, the emotional intensity diminishes and cognitive resources become available for analysis. This does not mean minimizing genuine hardship or denying pain. Rather, it involves selecting language that supports constructive engagement. Precise and measured wording encourages the mind to seek solutions instead of rehearsing despair. Over time, this habit reshapes your emotional landscape. You become less vulnerable to extremes of reaction and more capable of sustained, rational effort. Another dimension of thought control involves the management of mental time. Many people oscillate between rumination about the past and anxiety about the future, rarely inhabiting the present moment with full attention. Thoughts about past events often revolve around regret or resentment, replaying scenarios that cannot be altered. Thoughts about the future frequently center on imagined failures or uncertainties that have not yet occurred. Both tendencies consume cognitive energy without producing meaningful progress. Directing your thoughts toward the present does not imply ignoring the lessons of the past or neglecting preparation for the future. It means anchoring your primary awareness in the actions available now. The present moment is the only domain in which influence can be exercised. When your attention is grounded in current activity, efficiency increases and emotional turbulence decreases. You address problems as they arise instead of amplifying them through speculative thinking. Practicing presence requires deliberate effort, especially in an environment designed to fragment attention. Each time you notice your mind drifting into unproductive rumination, you gently return it to the task at hand. This repeated return strengthens neural circuits associated with mindfulness and weakens those that sustain distraction. Gradually, presence becomes less an imposed discipline and more a natural mode of engagement. As your capacity for present-focused thinking develops, you may observe an increase in the clarity of your goals. Many ambitions remain vague because they are conceived in abstract or distant terms. When you translate these ambitions into specific actions that can be performed now, they acquire practical significance. Thought control thus becomes a bridge between intention and execution. It transforms aspirations from distant ideals into structured sequences of behavior. This transformation is reinforced by the deliberate use of mental rehearsal. The mind possesses a remarkable ability to simulate experience, activating neural patterns similar to those involved in actual performance. When you vividly imagine executing a task with competence and composure, you prime your nervous system for effective action. Mental rehearsal is not a substitute for practice, but it enhances readiness and confidence. It aligns expectation with effort, reducing the gap between planning and performance. Equally important is the cultivation of tolerance for discomfort. Attempts to control thought often encounter resistance in the form of restlessness, doubt, or frustration. The mind may protest the interruption of familiar habits, generating arguments in favor of returning to automatic patterns. Recognizing this resistance as a predictable aspect of growth prevents discouragement. Discomfort signals that established neural pathways are being challenged and new ones are forming. By learning to remain present with discomfort without immediate retreat, you expand your capacity for sustained effort. This endurance is essential for meaningful change. Many worthwhile pursuits involve periods of uncertainty and strain. When your thinking remains steady in the face of these conditions, you preserve the continuity of action required for progress. Persistence becomes less a matter of willpower and more a consequence of stable mental orientation. As these practices accumulate, you begin to perceive a subtle coherence emerging in your experience. Thoughts, emotions, and actions align more consistently with your chosen principles. Internal conflict diminishes because competing narratives are examined and integrated rather than ignored. Decisions are made with greater confidence because they arise from a transparent process of evaluation. This coherence fosters a sense of integrity, the feeling that your inner and outer lives are mutually supportive. Integrity in thinking also influences how you interpret success and failure. Success is no longer viewed solely as external achievement, but as evidence of effective alignment between intention and action. Failure becomes information rather than condemnation. It reveals aspects of strategy or execution that require adjustment. This perspective sustains motivation by preserving a constructive relationship with outcome. You remain committed to improvement without attaching your worth to temporary results. In the broader context of life, thought control serves as a foundation for adaptability. Circumstances inevitably change, introducing new variables that demand revised responses. A flexible mind, trained to observe and evaluate its own processes, adapts more readily than one bound by rigid assumptions. You approach novelty with analytical curiosity instead of defensive resistance. This openness allows you to incorporate new information and refine your methods continuously. Adaptability is closely linked to creativity. When the mind is not preoccupied with habitual worries, it has greater capacity to explore alternative perspectives. Creative insight often emerges from the ability to suspend automatic judgments and entertain unconventional connections. By managing your thoughts deliberately, you create mental space in which innovation can occur. Solutions that once seemed inaccessible become visible through expanded perception. Throughout this process, it is essential to maintain a balanced understanding of control. Absolute control over thought is neither possible nor desirable. The mind's spontaneity is a source of intuition and discovery. The objective is not to eliminate spontaneity, but to guide it within a framework of awareness. You allow thoughts to arise freely while retaining the authority to choose which ones to cultivate. This balance preserves vitality while ensuring direction. As your practice matures, you may notice that periods of silence between thoughts become more frequent and comfortable. These intervals are not empty in a negative sense. They are spaces of clarity, in which perception is unfiltered by commentary. In such moments, experience is apprehended directly, without the distortion of habitual narratives. This clarity refreshes attention and restores perspective. It reminds you that beneath the constant movement of thought lies a stable field of awareness. Returning regularly to this field strengthens your sense of continuity amid change. External events fluctuate, and internal states evolve, but the capacity to observe remains constant. By identifying with this observing awareness rather than with transient thoughts, you anchor your identity in something more enduring than circumstance. This anchoring provides resilience in the face of uncertainty and supports a steady commitment to growth. Ultimately, the disciplined guidance of thought reveals a principle that extends beyond individual technique. It demonstrates that the quality of your engagement with life depends on the quality of your inner dialogue. When that dialogue is characterized by clarity, precision, and intentionality, your actions reflect the same attributes. You participate in your own development with increasing sophistication, shaping a life that expresses considered values rather than accidental patterns. This realization invites continual refinement. Each day presents new situations that test and strengthen your capacity for awareness. By meeting these situations with deliberate attention, you reaffirm the central insight of this journey, that within the realm of thought lies the power to influence experience profoundly. Through consistent practice, that power becomes not an abstract concept, but a lived reality, guiding you toward a life constructed with purpose and understanding. With continued practice, the discipline of guiding your thoughts begins to influence not only how you respond to individual situations, but how you construct meaning from your entire life. Human beings are natural storytellers. You are constantly assembling experiences into narratives that explain who you are, what the world is like, and what you can expect from the future. These narratives operate quietly in the background, shaping perception long before conscious analysis begins. When left unexamined, they can confine you to roles defined by past events. When consciously revised, they become instruments of growth. Many limiting narratives originate in moments of emotional intensity. A single failure may evolve into a generalized belief about personal inadequacy. A rejection may harden into an expectation of exclusion. Over time, these interpretations merge into an identity that appears stable and unquestionable. Yet, identity constructed in this way is selective. It highlights certain experiences while ignoring others that contradict the prevailing story. Thought control involves bringing these hidden assumptions into awareness and subjecting them to careful review. Revising a personal narrative does not require denying the reality of painful events. It requires integrating them into a broader context that acknowledges resilience and learning. When you reinterpret a setback as a component of development rather than a final verdict, you alter its psychological impact. The event remains part of your history, but it no longer defines your limits. This reinterpretation expands the range of futures you consider attainable. The ability to reshape narrative is closely connected to emotional intelligence. Emotions provide valuable information about your relationship to circumstances, but they do not always deliver accurate conclusions. A feeling of fear may signal genuine risk or simply reflect unfamiliarity. A sense of discouragement may arise from temporary fatigue rather than fundamental incapacity. By examining the thoughts that accompany emotions, you distinguish between signals that require action and those that require reassessment. This distinction is essential for effective decision-making. When emotions are accepted without analysis, they can dominate judgment, narrowing perspective, and accelerating impulsive choices. When emotions are observed in conjunction with reflective thought, they become sources of insight rather than commands. You learn to respect emotional data while retaining the authority to interpret it within a rational framework. As your interpretive skills develop, you may notice an increased capacity for patience. Many difficulties intensify because of the demand for immediate resolution. The mind seeks certainty and closure, often preferring a flawed conclusion to sustained ambiguity. Thought control encourages tolerance for incomplete information. You become willing to remain in a state of inquiry while evidence accumulates. This patience supports more accurate assessments and reduces the likelihood of premature decisions. Patience also influences your relationship with progress. Meaningful change rarely occurs in sudden leaps. It emerges through incremental adjustments that compound over time. When you expect transformation to be instantaneous, gradual improvement can appear insignificant, leading to discouragement. By aligning your expectations with the natural pace of development, you cultivate persistence. You recognize that each deliberate thought and action contributes to a trajectory that may only become visible in retrospect. In this context, consistency assumes greater importance than intensity. Brief periods of extreme effort often give way to exhaustion and abandonment. Sustained, moderate practice integrates more effectively into daily life. Thought control thrives on repetition that is steady rather than dramatic. Each moment of awareness reinforces neural patterns that support clarity. Over months and years, these patterns establish a stable foundation for continued growth. The stability produced by consistent practice enhances your capacity to engage with complexity. Modern life presents an abundance of information and competing demands. Without disciplined thinking, complexity can overwhelm, leading to confusion or avoidance. A trained mind approaches complexity methodically. It separates issues into components, evaluates them sequentially, and integrates findings into coherent strategies. This analytical approach transforms complexity from a source of anxiety into a field of exploration. Exploration, in turn, fosters a sense of agency. When you perceive yourself as capable of understanding and influencing your environment, motivation increases. Agency is not the belief that you control every outcome, but the recognition that your responses matter. Thought control strengthens this recognition by demonstrating repeatedly that deliberate mental effort produces tangible effects. Each successful redirection of attention or reinterpretation of experience confirms your participation in shaping events. This participation extends to ethical considerations. As awareness of your thought processes expands, you become more sensitive to the impact of your actions on others. Reflective thinking encourages empathy by allowing you to imagine perspectives beyond your immediate viewpoint. You evaluate choices not only for personal benefit, but for their broader consequences. In this way, thought control contributes to the development of character as well as competence. Character shaped by awareness tends to exhibit coherence between intention and behavior. You act in ways that reflect considered values rather than momentary impulses. This coherence generates trust, both internally and externally. You trust yourself because your decisions arise from transparent reasoning. Others trust you because your actions display consistency and integrity. Relationships grounded in such trust provide support that reinforces continued development. As your inner discipline matures, you may encounter periods of reflection in which the distinction between observer and thought becomes increasingly subtle. You recognize that awareness itself is not static but dynamic, capable of expanding to include ever more aspects of experience. This expansion does not distance you from life. It deepens engagement. You participate fully in events while maintaining the capacity to observe your responses. Engagement and observation function together, enriching perception. From this vantage, success acquires a broader definition. It is measured not solely by external achievement, but by the quality of consciousness you bring to each endeavor. A task performed with clarity and presence carries intrinsic value, independent of outcome. This perspective reduces the fear of failure and encourages experimentation. You become willing to attempt challenges because the process itself contributes to growth. Growth guided by conscious thought is inherently open-ended. There is no final stage at which development ceases. Each insight reveals further dimensions to explore. This openness invites humility, the recognition that understanding is always partial and evolving. Humility protects against complacency by sustaining curiosity. You continue to question assumptions, refine methods, and adapt to new information. In embracing this ongoing process, you align yourself with the principle that underlies all learning, the interplay between stability and change. Stability arises from disciplined habits of awareness and evaluation. Change arises from the application of those habits to new circumstances. Together, they create a rhythm that supports continuous evolution. You remain grounded while moving forward, secure in your capacity to navigate uncertainty. The cumulative effect of these practices is a transformation in how you inhabit your life. Experience becomes less a sequence of reactions and more a field of deliberate participation. You approach each day with the understanding that your thoughts are active elements in shaping events. This understanding does not impose pressure. It offers opportunity. It reminds you that within the flow of ordinary moments lies the potential for intentional creation. By sustaining attention to the quality of your thinking, you cultivate a form of mastery that permeates every domain of activity. Work becomes an arena for focused contribution, relationships, a context for empathetic connection, and challenges, occasions for refined judgment. The mind, once a source of distraction or doubt, evolves into a disciplined ally. Through this evolution, you come to appreciate that the power of thought control is not confined to isolated techniques. It represents a comprehensive orientation toward living. It is the commitment to meet experience with awareness, to interpret events with care, and to act in accordance with deliberate values. In honoring this commitment, you participate actively in the ongoing creation of your life, shaping it with intention, clarity, and enduring purpose.
As this orientation toward deliberate living becomes more familiar, you begin to recognize that the management of thought is inseparable from the management of energy. Every thought you entertain carries an energetic cost. Some thoughts concentrate energy, directing it toward purposeful action. Others disperse energy through worry, resentment, or distraction. Over time, the balance between these patterns determines not only productivity, but the overall vitality with which you experience life. Unexamined thinking often fragments energy across competing concerns. The mind rehearses unresolved conversations, anticipates unlikely disasters, and revisits past disappointments. Each mental rehearsal consumes attention that could otherwise support present activity. The cumulative effect is fatigue that appears disproportionate to external demands. By contrast, disciplined thinking conserves energy by limiting engagement with thoughts that do not serve constructive ends. You learn to recognize when reflection has yielded all useful insight and when continued rumination merely perpetuates tension. This conservation of energy enhances clarity. When mental resources are not depleted by repetitive cycles, they remain available for creative and analytical work. Tasks that once felt overwhelming become manageable because attention can be sustained without interruption. Clarity also improves emotional balance. With fewer competing narratives vying for dominance, the mind settles into a steadier rhythm. Decisions emerge from calm evaluation rather than hurried reaction. An important aspect of energetic management involves the acceptance of mental limits. Thought control does not imply continuous exertion. Just as physical muscles require rest, cognitive faculties benefit from intervals of recovery. Intentional pauses in activity allow the mind to integrate information and restore focus. These pauses are not signs of inefficiency, but components of effective practice. By alternating periods of concentrated effort with deliberate rest, you maintain a sustainable pace of engagement. Rest, when approached consciously, differs from passive distraction. Many forms of entertainment simulate relaxation while subtly stimulating the same circuits that generate restlessness. Genuine restoration arises from activities that quiet the mental stream and reconnect you with sensory experience. Walking without digital interruption, attending to natural surroundings, or engaging in simple physical movement can recalibrate attention. Such practices remind you that awareness extends beyond conceptual thought into direct perception. Direct perception grounds thinking in reality. When you attend carefully to immediate sensory detail, abstract worries lose some of their persuasive force. The present environment asserts itself with clarity that counters speculative anxiety. This grounding effect reinforces the habit of returning to what is tangible and actionable. Over time, it reduces the tendency to inhabit imagined scenarios at the expense of lived experience. As your relationship with energy and perception stabilizes, you may observe a refinement in motivation. Motivation shaped by uncontrolled thought often fluctuates dramatically. It surges in response to inspiration and collapses under the weight of doubt. Motivation supported by disciplined thinking is steadier because it rests on chosen commitments rather than transient moods. You act not solely when you feel compelled, but because you understand the significance of sustained effort. This steadiness enables long-term projects that require patience and cumulative investment. Whether pursuing intellectual mastery, professional advancement, or personal transformation, extended endeavors test the reliability of your mental framework. Thought control provides the structure necessary to navigate periods when external rewards are distant. You remain oriented toward process, trusting that consistent action guided by clear reasoning will yield results over time. Trust in process is reinforced by reflective evaluation. At regular intervals, you review your methods and outcomes, assessing their alignment with your intentions. This evaluation is neither self-congratulatory nor self-punitive. It is an objective inquiry into effectiveness. By examining what works and what requires adjustment, you refine your approach without undermining confidence. Reflection thus becomes a tool for calibration, ensuring that effort remains intelligently directed. Intelligent direction also involves recognizing the influence of environment on thought. Physical surroundings, social contexts, and informational inputs all shape mental patterns. Spaces characterized by disorder or constant interruption encourage scattered thinking. Environments designed for focus support coherence. Similarly, relationships that reward clarity and honesty reinforce disciplined thought, while those that thrive on drama or ambiguity can destabilize it. You cannot control every environmental factor, but you can make deliberate choices about the contexts you inhabit. By arranging your surroundings to minimize unnecessary distraction and maximize supportive influences, you create conditions that align with your objectives. This alignment reduces friction between intention and circumstance, making disciplined thinking more accessible. The social dimension of thought control extends beyond immediate environment into communication. When you articulate your ideas clearly to others, you refine them internally. Language serves as both a medium of expression and a tool of clarification. Explaining a concept requires organizing it into coherent structure, revealing gaps in understanding that might otherwise remain hidden. Through dialogue, you test interpretations against alternative perspectives, strengthening those that withstand scrutiny. Engaging in thoughtful conversation cultivates humility and openness. You encounter viewpoints that challenge assumptions and expand comprehension. Rather than perceiving disagreement as threat, you approach it as opportunity for refinement. This orientation transforms interaction into collaborative inquiry. Collective intelligence emerges when individuals contribute disciplined thought to shared exploration. Within this collaborative framework, responsibility for your own thinking remains central. External perspectives inform but do not replace personal judgment. You integrate insights from others while maintaining the capacity for independent evaluation. This balance preserves autonomy without isolating you from the benefits of shared knowledge. As autonomy and collaboration mature together, your sense of purpose becomes more defined. Purpose arises from the convergence of values, abilities, and contributions. Thought control clarifies each of these elements by removing distortions that obscure perception. You identify what matters to you with greater precision, recognize your strengths and limitations realistically, and discern where your efforts can have meaningful impact. Acting in accordance with clarified purpose generates a distinctive form of satisfaction. It is not the fleeting pleasure of immediate gratification, but the deeper fulfillment associated with coherent direction. You experience your activities as components of an integrated whole rather than isolated tasks. This integration reduces internal conflict and enhances commitment. Commitment sustained by clear purpose inevitably encounters obstacles. External resistance, unforeseen complications, and internal doubt are unavoidable aspects of ambitious pursuit. Thought control equips you to meet these obstacles without relinquishing direction. You analyze difficulties systematically, separating controllable factors from those beyond influence. Energy is invested where it can produce change and conserved where it cannot. This pragmatic orientation prevents frustration from escalating into despair. You accept the presence of limits while continuing to explore possibilities within them. Acceptance does not signify resignation, it reflects accurate appraisal. By working with reality as it is, rather than as you wish it to be, you maximize effectiveness. Effectiveness measured over time reveals a pattern of incremental mastery. Skills improve, understanding deepens, and competence stabilizes. These developments are not accidental. They result from the sustained application of disciplined thought to varied circumstances. Each experience becomes material for learning, integrated through reflection into evolving competence. In observing this progression, you gain appreciation for the reciprocal relationship between inner and outer change. Adjustments in thinking alter behavior, and altered behavior reshapes environment. Environment, in turn, influences subsequent thought. Recognizing this cycle encourages deliberate intervention at multiple points. You refine internal dialogue, while also modifying external conditions, creating a reinforcing system that supports growth. The reinforcing system you construct through these practices embodies a central insight that life is neither entirely predetermined nor entirely malleable. It is a dynamic interaction between given conditions and chosen responses. Thought control operates within this interaction, expanding the range of responses available. By cultivating awareness, evaluation, and intentional action, you participate more fully in directing the course of your experience. Participation of this kind transforms your relationship with uncertainty. Instead of perceiving the unknown as a void to be feared, you approach it as a domain of potential. Equipped with disciplined thinking, you trust your capacity to navigate emerging situations. This trust fosters courage, not as reckless disregard for risk, but as measured willingness to engage with possibility. Through sustained engagement, the practice of guiding your thoughts becomes an expression of respect for your own potential. You acknowledge that the mind is a powerful instrument deserving of careful stewardship. By attending to its patterns, refining its language, and directing its energy, you honor the role it plays in shaping every dimension of your life. In this ongoing stewardship lies the essence of transformation. Change is no longer an external event imposed by circumstance, but an internal process enacted through awareness. Each deliberate thought contributes to a structure that supports clarity, resilience, and purpose. Over time, this structure defines the character of your experience. You inhabit a life shaped not by accident or inertia, but by the steady influence of conscious design. As conscious design becomes a consistent feature of your life, you start to perceive time differently. For many people, time feels like a force that moves independently of their will, carrying them from one obligation to the next. Days blur into routines, and weeks pass with little sense of intentional progression. When your thoughts are guided with care, however, time is experienced less as a current that sweeps you away and more as a medium in which you can place deliberate markers of meaning. This shift arises because disciplined thinking encourages purposeful allocation of attention. You begin to distinguish between activity and significance. Not everything that demands your time deserves equal investment of your mental energy. By evaluating commitments through the lens of your values and objectives, you prioritize actions that contribute to long-term coherence. Time organized in this way acquires texture. It is no longer a sequence of tasks, but a structured narrative in which each element relates to a broader intention. Structured time supports the development of rhythm. Human performance is optimized not by constant acceleration, but by alternating cycles of effort and renewal. When you align your schedule with natural fluctuations in concentration and energy, you respect the biological foundations of cognition. Periods of focused work are interwoven with intervals of reflection and rest. This rhythm stabilizes productivity and preserves mental clarity, preventing the erosion of attention that accompanies chronic overextension. Within a stable rhythm, habits assume central importance. Habits are the mechanisms through which repeated thoughts and actions become automatic. They reduce the cognitive load required to perform routine behaviors, freeing mental resources for higher-order reasoning. Thought control interacts with habit formation by determining which patterns are reinforced. When you consciously select thoughts that support constructive routines, those routines gradually embed themselves into daily life. The formation of beneficial habits depends on consistency more than intensity. Small, repeatable actions performed with awareness accumulate into substantial change. Each repetition strengthens neural pathways that favor efficiency and reliability. Over time, behaviors that once required deliberate effort become integrated into your identity. You do not merely perform them, you recognize them as expressions of who you are becoming. Identity shaped through intentional habit carries a stabilizing influence. It provides a reference point against which decisions are evaluated. When faced with competing options, you ask not only what is expedient, but what aligns with the person you are committed to being. This inquiry simplifies choice by anchoring it in established principles. Decisions guided by identity tend to be more coherent and less susceptible to momentary fluctuation. Coherence between identity and action fosters a sense of authenticity. You experience yourself as unified rather than fragmented across roles or contexts. Authenticity does not imply rigidity. It allows for adaptation while preserving core values. You adjust methods to suit circumstances without compromising the principles that define your direction. This balance between flexibility and constancy enhances resilience in changing environments. Changing environments inevitably introduce uncertainty and complexity. The disciplined mind approaches these conditions with structured curiosity. Instead of reacting defensively, you analyze emerging patterns and seek underlying causes. Complexity is decomposed into manageable elements, each examined in relation to the whole. This analytical approach transforms uncertainty into an invitation to learn. You engage with novelty as a source of information rather than a threat to stability. Learning sustained over time refines judgment. Judgment is the capacity to integrate knowledge, experience, and intuition into effective decision-making. It develops through exposure to varied situations and the reflective assimilation of outcomes. Thought control accelerates this development by ensuring that experiences are not merely endured, but examined. You extract principles from events, identifying strategies that can be generalized and applied elsewhere. As judgment matures, confidence becomes grounded in evidence rather than assumption. You trust your capacity to evaluate situations because you have practiced doing so repeatedly. This trust reduces hesitation and supports decisive action. Decisiveness, in turn, reinforces momentum. Projects advance, relationships deepen, and opportunities are pursued with clarity. Momentum generated by disciplined thought extends beyond personal achievement. It influences the way you contribute to collective endeavors. Whether in professional settings or community contexts, your capacity for clear reasoning and measured response enhances group effectiveness. You become a stabilizing presence in discussions, able to synthesize perspectives and guide conversations toward constructive resolution. Constructive resolution depends on the ability to manage conflict without surrendering to hostility. Thought control equips you to separate issues from personal identity. You evaluate disagreements in terms of ideas and outcomes rather than perceived threats to status. This separation preserves respect and facilitates collaboration. Conflicts approached in this manner often yield insights that would remain inaccessible in adversarial exchanges. Collaboration enriched by disciplined thinking amplifies creativity. Diverse perspectives interact within a framework of mutual consideration, generating solutions that exceed individual capacity. You participate in this process not by suppressing your viewpoint, but by articulating it with clarity and openness. The exchange of ideas becomes a dynamic system in which each contribution is refined through dialogue. Dialogue sustained over time cultivates shared understanding. Groups that engage in reflective communication develop collective narratives that guide coordinated action. These narratives function as extensions of individual thought control, scaling awareness to the level of community. Through participation in such systems, you experience the interplay between personal discipline and social structure. Your internal practices influence external relationships, and those relationships in turn reinforce internal growth. Within this reciprocal framework, purpose acquires a communal dimension. Personal goals intersect with broader objectives, linking individual development to collective well-being. Thought control clarifies how your skills and values can serve larger contexts. Acting with this awareness generates a sense of belonging grounded in contribution rather than conformity. You recognize yourself as both an autonomous agent and a participant in interconnected systems. Interconnection invites reflection on responsibility. The consequences of your thoughts and actions extend beyond immediate experience. Decisions influence networks of relationships and environments. By approaching choice with awareness, you acknowledge this reach and accept the ethical dimension of agency. Responsibility becomes an expression of maturity, guiding behavior toward outcomes that respect both personal integrity and shared welfare. Maturity cultivated through disciplined thought is characterized by balance. You integrate ambition with humility, independence with cooperation, and analysis with intuition. Extremes are moderated by the recognition that effective living requires the harmonization of complementary forces. This integration produces a stable platform from which to engage with life's complexity. Engagement from such a platform is marked by presence. You inhabit each moment with attention that is both focused and receptive. Tasks are performed with care, conversations entered with genuine interest, and challenges met with composed determination. Presence transforms ordinary activities into opportunities for refinement. Every interaction becomes a site where awareness can be exercised and deepened. Deepening awareness gradually alters your perception of fulfillment. Satisfaction arises less from isolated achievements and more from the quality of participation in ongoing processes. You value the refinement of skill, the clarity of understanding, and the authenticity of connection. These dimensions of fulfillment are renewable. They do not depend on singular events, but on sustained modes of engagement. Sustained engagement reveals the continuity underlying change. Experiences vary, circumstances evolve, and identities expand, yet the practice of guiding thought remains a constant thread. It accompanies you through transitions, providing orientation amid shifting landscapes. By returning repeatedly to awareness, evaluation, and intentional action, you maintain coherence across phases of life. This coherence does not eliminate difficulty. Challenges persist, and uncertainty remains an inherent feature of existence. What changes is your relationship to these conditions. Equipped with disciplined thinking, you approach them as integral components of growth. You accept that complexity and imperfection are not obstacles to a meaningful life, but elements of its texture. In embracing this perspective, you complete a significant reorientation. Thought control is no longer perceived as a technique applied to isolated problems. It is recognized as a comprehensive stance toward experience. You live with the understanding that the mind is both interpreter and architect, shaping how reality is encountered and what possibilities are pursued. Through continuous practice, this understanding becomes embodied. It informs posture, speech, and action. You carry yourself with the quiet confidence of someone who participates consciously in the construction of meaning. Each day offers occasions to refine perception and reaffirm intention. In responding to these occasions with awareness, you sustain the transformation initiated by disciplined thought. The journey remains open-ended. There are always deeper levels of clarity to explore and subtler patterns to refine. Yet within this openness lies assurance. You have cultivated a method for engaging with whatever arises. By guiding your thoughts with care and consistency, you sustain a life characterized by purpose, adaptability, and enduring presence. Over time, the sustained practice of directing your thoughts leads you to a quieter but more profound realization. The quality of your inner life determines the depth of your outer experience. Events themselves are often neutral until interpreted. Two people can inhabit the same circumstances and emerge with entirely different impressions, shaped not by the events alone, but by the meanings assigned to them. When you become skilled in examining and choosing those meanings, you gain influence over the texture of your lived reality. This influence is most visible in moments of transition. Life inevitably presents periods when established structures dissolve and new directions are not yet fully formed. Such intervals can provoke anxiety because they disrupt familiar patterns. The disciplined mind approaches transition as a space of possibility rather than solely as a loss of certainty. You acknowledge the discomfort of change while recognizing its generative potential. By holding both awareness and openness simultaneously, you remain steady in environments that might otherwise feel destabilizing. Stability during transition depends on an internal reference point that is not tied to external conditions. Through repeated observation of your thoughts, you have cultivated familiarity with the field of awareness in which they arise. This familiarity functions as an anchor. No matter how circumstances shift, the capacity to observe and choose remains available. You return to it as a source of orientation, reaffirming that while situations evolve, your ability to respond consciously endures. From this anchor emerges a refined sense of trust. It is not blind confidence that outcomes will always align with preference, but a grounded assurance in your capacity to meet outcomes intelligently. Trust of this kind reduces the impulse to control every variable. You focus instead on preparing your mind to engage effectively with whatever unfolds. Preparation replaces prediction as the central strategy. By strengthening attention, reasoning, and adaptability, you equip yourself for a wide range of possibilities. Equipped in this way, you begin to perceive challenges as invitations to exercise cultivated capacities. Difficult conversations become opportunities to practice clarity and empathy. Complex problems invite structured analysis. Unexpected setbacks test resilience and creativity. Each encounter contributes to a cycle of application and refinement. Skills developed in theory are validated in practice, and practical experience feeds back into deeper understanding. This cycle fosters a dynamic equilibrium between reflection and action. Excessive reflection without application can lead to stagnation, while action without reflection risks repetition of error. Thought control harmonizes these tendencies. You reflect in order to inform action, and you act in order to generate material for further reflection. The rhythm of this exchange sustains continuous development. Continuous development gradually reshapes your perception of limitation. Boundaries that once appeared fixed reveal themselves as provisional. Some constraints remain genuine, imposed by physical or social realities, but many are discovered to be artifacts of unexamined belief. As you test assumptions through deliberate effort, you expand the domain of what feels attainable. This expansion is not reckless optimism. It is empirically grounded in experience. Experience accumulated through mindful engagement deepens appreciation for nuance. Situations rarely conform to simple categories of success or failure. They contain layers of consequence and interpretation. The disciplined thinker resists the temptation to reduce complexity to convenient slogans. Instead, you attend to detail, recognizing that subtle distinctions often determine effective response. Nuanced perception enhances judgment and enriches understanding. Understanding enriched by nuance encourages compassion. When you perceive the intricate factors that shape behavior, both in yourself and in others, rigid judgment softens. You recognize that actions emerge from networks of thought, emotion, and circumstance. This recognition does not excuse harmful behavior, but it contextualizes it. You respond with firmness when necessary, yet remain aware of the shared human condition underlying difference. Compassion integrated with clarity transforms interaction. You engage with others neither from detached superiority nor from unguarded sentimentality, but from balanced awareness. Communication becomes an exchange aimed at mutual comprehension. You listen attentively, articulate precisely, and adjust interpretations in light of new information. Relationships grounded in such communication tend to be resilient because they are sustained by understanding rather than assumption. As relational resilience grows, so does your sense of participation in a broader human narrative. You perceive your personal development as intertwined with collective evolution. Insights gained through individual practice contribute to shared knowledge, just as cultural inheritances inform your own perspective. This reciprocity situates your efforts within a continuum that extends beyond immediate experience. Awareness of this continuum invites reflection on legacy. Legacy is not limited to grand achievements. It is expressed in the patterns of thought and action you model daily. Each interaction carries the potential to influence others subtly. By embodying disciplined awareness, you demonstrate an approach to living that can be observed and adopted. In this way, the practice of thought control radiates outward, shaping environments through example. Example possesses a persuasive power that surpasses instruction. People are often more responsive to lived demonstration than to abstract advice. When your conduct consistently reflects clarity and intentionality, it communicates the viability of those qualities. Others may inquire into your methods, initiating dialogues that extend the reach of your practice. Through such exchanges, personal discipline contributes to communal learning. Communal learning reinforces personal commitment. Explaining principles to others requires renewed engagement with them. You revisit foundational ideas, test them against fresh questions, and refine articulation. Teaching and learning merge into a reciprocal process that deepens mastery. The boundaries between personal growth and collective contribution blur, revealing them as aspects of a single movement toward understanding. Within this movement, humility remains essential. No matter how refined your practice becomes, the field of knowledge and experience is inexhaustible. Recognizing this prevents stagnation and sustains curiosity. You approach each day as both student and practitioner, prepared to encounter perspectives that challenge and expand your framework. Humility ensures that confidence remains flexible rather than rigid. Flexibility supported by humility enhances creativity. When you are not bound to defend fixed positions, you can explore unconventional connections. Ideas intersect in novel ways, generating insights that might otherwise remain concealed. Creativity flourishes in the space opened by disciplined yet open-minded thought. It transforms routine activity into experimentation and invites innovation into familiar domains. Innovation guided by awareness carries ethical weight. New possibilities introduce new responsibilities. As you develop the capacity to influence outcomes more effectively, you also assume greater accountability for their implications. Thought control provides the evaluative tools necessary to consider consequences thoughtfully. You balance ambition with consideration, ensuring that progress aligns with values. Values clarified through reflection serve as navigational instruments. They orient decision-making across diverse contexts, from personal relationships to professional endeavors. When choices are measured against articulated principles, coherence is maintained. You avoid fragmentation by ensuring that actions in one domain do not contradict commitments in another. This integrity reinforces trust in your own judgment. Trust, grounded in integrity, stabilizes identity amid change. Roles may shift, circumstances evolve, and goals transform, yet the underlying commitment to conscious engagement persists. You recognize yourself not by static labels, but by the manner in which you meet experience. Identity becomes a verb rather than a noun, defined by ongoing practice. Practice sustained over years accumulates into wisdom. Wisdom is not merely the possession of information, but the capacity to apply understanding judiciously. It integrates knowledge, experience, and ethical awareness into responses that are proportionate and humane. Thought control nurtures wisdom by ensuring that reflection accompanies action and that action informs reflection. Wisdom expressed in daily living manifests as composure. You encounter success without arrogance and difficulty without despair. Emotional fluctuations continue to arise, but they are held within a broader context of perspective. Composure does not suppress feeling, it situates feeling within an ordered framework. From this framework, responses emerge that are both authentic and measured. Measured responses contribute to a sense of harmony. Inner dialogue aligns with outward behavior, and personal aims resonate with communal concerns. Harmony does not eliminate tension, but integrates it into a dynamic balance. You navigate competing demands with an awareness that seeks synthesis rather than domination. This integrative approach reduces internal conflict and supports sustainable engagement. Sustainable engagement ultimately defines a life shaped by the power of thought control. You participate in the unfolding of events with attentiveness and intention. Each decision, conversation, and reflection becomes part of an ongoing composition. The quality of this composition depends on the care with which you guide your thinking. In recognizing this dependence, you reaffirm the central principle that has guided your journey, that mastery of thought is both a discipline and a form of freedom. It liberates you from unconscious compulsion while binding you to conscious responsibility. Through its practice, you cultivate a life marked by clarity, compassion, and purposeful action. Such a life is not immune to uncertainty or hardship, but it is equipped to engage them constructively. You move forward with the understanding that every moment offers material for awareness, and every challenge invites refinement. By sustaining this orientation, you continue to shape your experience with deliberate intelligence, participating actively in the ongoing creation of meaning. In the end, the power of thought control is the power to participate consciously in your own life. By learning to observe, question, and guide your thoughts, you transform the way you interpret events, respond to challenges, and pursue your goals. This discipline does not remove difficulty, but it equips you with clarity, resilience, and purpose. Over time, your inner dialogue becomes a reliable foundation for meaningful action. Through consistent awareness and intentional thinking, you shape a life that reflects your deepest values, proving that lasting change begins in the mind and unfolds through every choice you make.